Sabrina here from Scrappy Tales Crafts, and today I'm going to be showing you a design team project for Trinity Stamps. I'm going to be creating 2 postcards using their Crafty Post stamp and die set. I'll be combining that with the Love You Bunches stamp, which you can see I'm stamping out the main floral image from that stamp set onto some cream cardstock with Versamark ink, and then onto a craft panel here with some brown distress ink. I think this is Rusty Hinge. I tried to find a brown that matched that craft cardstock, and I will be no line coloring that panel. For the cream panel, I'm going to pour some gold embossing powder over that stamped image, and then I will just heat set that with my heat tool. I'm going to be creating the same postcard, just one of them is going to be more involved while the other one is going to be pretty simple. I wanted to show you that you can use a design and either elevate it with coloring or just leave it tone on tone, which is what I will be doing with that cream panel. You can see I did stamp out that rosebud on craft cardstock with brown ink and cream cardstock with the gold embossing powder. Now I'm going to do some die cutting for my postcards. The rectangle you see is for the back of the postcard, and I added the stitch lines through the center. And then this die that I'm adding is actually 3 rows of stitch lines, and they're perfect for adding a sentiment to the back of your postcard. So I'm going to also die cut that. And then for the postage stamps on my postcards, I thought it would be cute to have the rosebud be the stamp. So I'm going to die cut both of those rosebuds using the rectangle small die from Crafty Post, and then the postage stamp layer that goes behind it I'm going to cut from gold foil cardstock. I also went ahead and cut the Hello shadow die from cream cardstock and then the word die from gold foiled cardstock. I did all my die cutting, stamping, and coloring ahead of time, and I'm working on both cards simultaneously here. Right now I'm stamping the little seal and the tail that goes with it onto some craft cardstock. I added a heart to the center of the seal, and I'm going to pour some gold embossing powder over those images, and these will go on the back of my postcard. And that little seal and the tail does come in the Crafty Post coordinating stamp set. So now I'm going to assemble one of these cards. This is going to be the more simple version. You can see I didn't even color that image. I really liked how it looked just gold heat embossed. I added a brown postage stamp frame around the postcard, and now I'm assembling my small postage stamp. So I first layered on a small skinny brown frame, which does come in the die set, and then I added my little rosebud image to the center of that. And now I'm layering up the hello word dies together. For this card I added the brown hello shadow to coordinate with that brown postage stamp frame. And I'm going to mat this onto some brown cardstock. I cut this piece from that same rectangle die from the die set, and I didn't line it up perfectly straight, so I'm just going to trim off the excess. And I wanted there to be brown on the back so that it coordinated a little bit more with the front. And so I'm adding that stitched line panel that I die cut out earlier. I trimmed it down to be a little bit smaller, and it just was too plain for me, so I'm going to basically do what I did on the front. I'm going to line this panel up in my Misty and then re-stamp that Love You Bunches bouquet. And again, I'll just gold heat emboss it. And I'm going to do the same for the other postcard. This is the one that's slightly larger. I used the rectangle die from the die set. I left this one the full size because I didn't want any brown on that postcard. So I'm just going to add my gold embossing powder to both of these panels. And then I will just heat set them. But before I do that, I'm going to stamp out my sentiments for these cards. So I'm going to combine the sentiments from Love You Bunches and from the Crafty Post stamp set. From Crafty Post, I'm going to stamp out a little handmade, and then from Love You Bunches, I will stamp out Hello for You. So it reads, a little handmade hello for you. And again, I'm going to stamp that up with Versamark ink and pour gold embossing powder over that. And I just love the look of cream and gold together. I love the tone on tone look of that. So here's how that other one turned out. I just heat set them, and then I'm going to add the seals for the back of my postcards. So just gluing those to the back towards the top right, and those are going to finish the back of my postcards. Now I'm going to work on the front. Actually, no, I'm going to glue the smaller one onto that brown panel onto the back of the postcard, and make sure you line it up so that when you turn it, it's not upside down. So here's the simplified version of the design I'm making today. I really like it, honestly. I think it would be really pretty in colored cardstock, maybe like a navy blue and a white embossing powder. And you can just make a whole bunch of these postcards really quickly. So the second version of this design is just a little bit more involved because I did no line color the image in with my colored pencils, and boy, did this take a long time. I'm only going to show you a third of the coloring, and that took 20 minutes of filming. So I think in total it took me an hour and a half to color this image with my color pencils. And that is because when you work with them, you work in layers. So you're coloring the same area multiple times, trying to get a seamless blend with them. When I work with colored pencils, I approach them sort of like I would with a Copic, where I start with my darkest pencil. For the leaves, I'm only using 2 pencils, and for the flowers, I use 3. But I'm taking my darkest pencil here and I'm mapping out my shadows. That's basically just a safety net for me. When I add the shadows in, I can better visualize what I'm coloring, especially with a no-line image. So I always go in with my darkest pencil first, and then I'll go over the whole leaf with my lightest pencil. Then I'll go back to my darker pencil and basically just go over those exact same shadow areas. I'm pressing a little bit harder than I did for the first layer. I will say the first layer, I'm barely touching the pencil to the paper. You do not want to build up too much wax, or else you're not going to get any blending. So you can see I'm going over this image 3 or 4 times until I get a blend that I'm happy with. But each time you go back in for a second or third layer, you want to add more pressure to that area. And eventually you're going to get a nice blend. But if you go in too dark too early, you're going to build up so much wax that there's just not going to be any area for blending. So I guess that is my advice for colored pencils. The learning curve for me was definitely not pressing down too hard, and just patience, guys. I mean, with a Copic, you would not have to go over the image more than once. So having to go over it 3 or 4 times is, I like it, but it's part of the reason I don't use my pencils so much, just because it takes too long. But I'm really happy with the end result. I love the look of color pencils on craft cardstock, and I definitely think it was worth the time. You know, I was watching a show while I colored this, so it's a good way of passing the time. So one other tip I would recommend is keep your pencils relatively sharp. Now, everyone on YouTube says you have to have the sharpest pencil imaginative to color with color pencils. I don't do that. I have my pencils pretty sharp, but they are not like pointy sharp all the time. I am not stopping to sharpen my pencil every 30 seconds. So I keep them pretty sharp just because you do want them to be sharp in order to add those details in, but you don't need them super sharp like everyone tells you to. I'm using a Prismacolor sharpener, and that was like, I think it was like $8 on Amazon, and it works really well. So that is what I use to sharpen my pencils. Now I'm working on one of the flower images. I did color them all red because I thought these were poppies, but I'm not really sure, honestly. But same deal with the petals. No line coloring for me is hard when it comes to flowers because there's so many petals. So like I said, if you start with your darkest color and map out those shadows, that's going to help you a lot. You're going to know which petals overlap and where to add the cascading shadows, so where one petal overlaps another, the one on the bottom is going to have to be naturally a little bit darker than the one on top. So definitely I would start with your darkest pencil if that makes you feel more secure. That it definitely does for me. And I would also recommend working in groups. Don't try to color in the whole image at once. I would recommend looking at each individual petal as opposed to the whole flower, because if you look at the whole flower, it's going to end up looking like a blob. So try to work in sections. Eventually, when you're more skilled, you can probably do the flower all in one go. But I'm working in about quarterly sections here. And if you're not getting enough contrast, just go back in with your darkest pencil and don't go over it again with the lightest. You can always add the contrast back in with your darkest pencil, and that's what I do for pretty much each petal. After I've finished blending, I will go over it one last time with my darkest pencil to add those shadow areas, especially where the petals overlap. All right, so that is going to finish up that one flower towards the top, and off camera I'm going to color in the rest. I wish I left in how I colored the center of that big flower at the bottom, but I basically just used grays and blacks, and I created little dots just to add some texture to the center of that flower. So now I'm going to assemble the postcard the same way I did for my first one. This time I added a cream die cut postcard frame on top of a slightly darker brown rectangle, which I cut from the rectangle die in the Crafty Post die set. I decided to pop up this panel with some foam tape in the center of the cream postage stamp frame. Now I'm going to work on the small postage stamp, so I'm going to glue down that skinny brown frame onto my gold postage stamp, and then I will pop up the little rose image in the center of that brown frame. I love how detailed that is. It's just super pretty. And I colored that little rosebud in the exact same way. And for the hello, I'm going to glue the gold word die on top of the cream hello shadow die, and then add that to the bottom just like I did on the last card. So it's the exact same design, it's just about an hour and a half longer to make, but I think it's worth it. I really love how this turned out. So I'm adding the back to the front now. Again, make sure you glue it so that it's not upside down when you flip it to the back. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know down below what you thought of these two postcards. I have really been enjoying creating postcards using the Crafty Post stamp and die set. And if you haven't yet already, go ahead and subscribe to my channel. I'm almost at 3,000 views. If you're watching me over at the Trinity channel, I will have my YouTube channel listed down below so you can check out my past Trinity videos as well as other videos that are related to card making. Again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!